It's now been over a month since the consolidation of the November 10th coup in Bolivia, in which President Evo Morales was ousted from power and sent into exile in Mexico. He's now in Argentina. We're seeing the coup continue to unfold still today, as it bears its effects on every institution in the country. There's a lot more that has not been covered in any type of international media, and in English, there's simply no one doing the work and following the story the way Ollie has been, and he's now in Villa Tunari today. If you're not familiar with Oliver Vargas, he's a writer who I worked with here in Quito at Tell Us Your English, who is now in his native Bolivia reporting independently. Hey, Ollie, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
First off, tell me where you are today, what the situation has been there, and why you think it's such an important place to be, an interesting place to be in the country right now.
Well, I'm in the town of Villa Tunari, which is in a region known as the Trópico of Cochabamba, or the Chapare region as well. It's just outside the city of Cochabamba. I would say it's the most important area of the country if you want to cover or want to learn about the ongoing resistance to the coup, the opposition to the coup, how people are being organised, because this is the bastion of Evo Morales' movement towards socialism. It was here where he was a union leader, when he was as a campesino leader, and where it was here where discussions began to create what is today the MAS. And it's here now that the organizations, social organizations, union organizations, indigenous organization is the strongest anywhere in the country. And this will be the base from which the wider opposition to the coup will reorganize and recalibrate.
Okay, I'd love to hear a bit more about the MAS and movements and the unions there. There was also a MAS meeting taking place in the Department of La Paz today. Tell us a bit more about what all this organizing is, what they're gearing up for, and how they're going about doing that.
There's a huge process of reorganization going on within the MAS, also within the unions. There's not just the unions, the social movements themselves. And this comes out of the fact that they recognize that whenever I left power, there was an enormous amount of confusion within the social movements. A lack of leadership in a lot of ways, and a recognition that the organisation at the grassroots level had been weakening over quite some time. So the first task was to reorganise those movements on the ground. This week, every single day, there's union meetings here in Chapare where they're trying to reorganise, strengthen the grassroots level of organisation. And that's something that's taking place right across the country. It is also a means of ironing out divisions that might have existed. So at the MAS Special Congress on Saturday, and there's a second one today, at both of those meetings, the labour unions, the COB, were present, and they'd actually sort of distanced themselves from the MAS somewhat after the coup. So this process of having congresses, party union congresses, is a process of bringing back those who fell out a little bit, distanced themselves a little bit, in some cases maybe, pushed out. And so this is a process of bringing all of those forces back together, because there's a real recognition that only through unity can they take on the coup authorities, because the coup authorities themselves are absolutely mired in division. So the only weapon that the MAS has is being able to reunite the sectors they represent, because those sectors are some of the most organised, are the most organised sections of civil society. So if all of those forces can be united, then they'll be in a much stronger position to face down what the coup is trying to do.
Okay, so Ollie, you've had the opportunity to spend some time with a very important news outlet and service for Bolivia and Chapare, which has significant reach among the people there, but is completely unknown outside of the country. Can you tell me a bit about what you've learned from them and what it is they do, which might differ from other outlets, whether corporate or corrupt, there in Bolivia, and which service they provide to the people that other services don't provide?
That's right. I spent a lot of time with a radio station called Kawsachun Coca, and their journalists have been, in fact, taking me all around this region, taking me to union meetings. I met the director, spoke to him at some length, and it's it gives a sense of the organisation, the social organisation that exists here. The fact that an outlet like this is going, so it's a community outlet. There's three main community media outlets in this region, and it's is listened uniformly by everyone in the Trópico de Cochabamba. Um, you can't really buy it. I haven't seen anywhere across this region anywhere where we can buy newspapers from capitalist media. Um, Everyone is extremely engaged with these outlets, and the reason for that is because it's they themselves who created them. So these aren't media outlets that are apart from the community, apart from social struggles. They were created by the unions. Each person, each union member, every month donates small amounts to keep these radios running. They operate out of the buildings of the unions. Kawsachun Coca themselves operate out of the building of the Six Federations, which is the organisation that represents the whole region, and other radio stations are based in the buildings of more local unions. So they see themselves as an instrument, really, for people here to convey their message, rather than some corporate outlet that's transmitting the words of those on high. And it's participative nature is what's so important, I think, because when I was speaking to the director, he said that he doesn't want this to be even a mechanism for the union leaders, political leaders of the mass. He wants this to be an instrument for those on the ground to be able to communicate with their own leaders and communicate their voice to Bolivia and to the world. And that's what they want to do. They want to reach. They're very active on social media now. They want to be able to reach outside the country and nationally. This isn't some like locally based community thing. Like they want this to be a political instrument that can broadcast the voice of people who aren't heard in Bolivian mainstream media.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. Their main platform on social media is, of course, Facebook, but they have posts with 3,000 to 5,000 likes and shares. So obviously it's reaching quite far. And I can't really think of anything that has that same effect in the United States, for example, where there's like grassroots media that is participatory in nature, which has that much of a reach within its own country and that people actually read. So let's go back to the origins of the coup. Lucas Corner, the editor of Venezuela Analysis, wrote this piece on fair.org titled "How the Global North's Left Media Helped Pave the Way for Bolivia's Right-Wing Coup." He talked about the making of an ecocidal murderer. What role would you say that the global North media and writers who bear zero responsibility before the Bolivian people played in paving the way for this coup?
That was an excellent article, and it sort of summarised the sort of cottage industry that's been created, especially in Western academia, that of leftists, of socialists, many of them call themselves Trotskyists, who have built careers out of arguing that Evo Morales is actually a capitalist. I think the chief among them is a British academic called Geoffrey Webber. He's written multiple books specifically on this topic, and they all use the same playbook in a lot of ways. They pick out lone voices within social movements, people who represent minority factions within movements, and amplify those voices. He's a worker, and he says this, and he says that Evo Morales is actually right wing, and that this isn't real socialism here. And all of these people they cite are people who are not representative at all of the movements they're supposedly part of. They're individuals. And when you do that, what you do is you ignore the voices of millions of working class indigenous Bolivians who are the leading forces within the organized sections of the working class, the organized sections of the indigenous communities, rather than some media friendly individuals. So this discourse that Evo Morales does not respect the environment, that Evo Morales represents a continuation of the neoliberal era in Bolivia. That's something that I think definitely filtered through. Some of these people were amplified in right-wing media, and then what this serves to do is sow divisions within movements. The labour unions have been the victim of this more than anyone. There are huge divisions um, within the COB, which is the Workers' Union Federation, and these are divisions which I think have come from outside in a lot of ways. Within the indigenous movements as well, the fact that light has been shone on individuals representing minority factions, the fact that their voices have been elevated over the majority of their movements, has caused huge amounts of antagonism within social movements. And I think that's exactly what the right have been trying to do, is break the organizational unity that the masses had. And they've achieved that in some ways. And this over the next few weeks is what is about trying to overcome some of those divisions that were caused.
Okay, so I want to give you the opportunity to respond directly to these claims by people who say that the program of Evo Morales and the MAS was not socialistic enough, that they made concessions within capitalism, that Evo was not an environmentalist. What was his actual record like? And God forbid, was Bolivia's process of change actually to the right of the DSA's beloved capitalist or Scandinavian countries? Was Evo actually positioned somewhere to the right of these Scandinavian countries that we love so much?
Yeah, and this is an absurdity, Tika. So, as I said, the academic Jeffrey Weber is someone who's written a number of books about this, however, it's really right-wing. But he's, in fact, a member of the British Labour Party. He's campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn. And the program that Evo Morales has implemented in Bolivia over the past 14 years is more radical than what Jeremy Corbyn has ever proposed in various successive Labour manifestos, as great as those manifestos have been. So I don't think there's any Scandinavian country or any significant left-wing movement that, for example, advocates the nationalisation of the majority of natural resources, of your national airline, of telecommunications, of over 200 sort of small manufacturing and other small state companies, of creating creating new state companies out of nothing, such as the space agency, such as the public transportation teleférico system, and using those to build an actual economic strategy for the wider economy. So, for example, the Labour Party in Britain, their program was limited to nationalising utilities, services that people use, and running them along need rather than profit. But what in Bolivia has happened is that profitable industries have been taken into state ownership, and the revenues from that then go to the state, which the state can then use to invest in agriculture, giving free farming equipment, modern farming equipment to campesinos. Can be invested in sort of public works, schools, hospital, roads. And so to actually, what that represents is a reorganization of the entire economy, rather than just providing public services to people. And I think the Scandinavian model and the model represented by, for example, the Labour Party, as progressive as that might be, that's something that doesn't cut into the logic of neoliberalism in a lot of ways, because it's still leaving the majority of the commanding heights of private industry in the hands of capitalists. Whereas this past 14 years in Bolivia represented an undercutting of that. And so the second claim about environmentalism is particularly absurd, because Bolivia and the global south generally are not the countries that are responsible, in their majority, responsible for the climate crisis in the world right now. In fact, Evo Morales was a leading thinker in a lot of ways when he first came into office about how to confront the climate crisis on a global scale. his argument, which came out of the Cochabamba Environmental People's Climate Congresses in, I think, 2008 it was, it's saying like, look, the countries of the global south, Bolivia and Latin America, we need a environmentally friendly policies, but we also need to develop, like, people here deserve a standard of living as high as those of the global north. We deserve hospitals, schools, infrastructure as high as those of the global north. And, to pay for that, you need to have some level of economic development. So we need to be able to develop using green technologies, which are expensive. So the global north has a responsibility as a form of reparations for colonialism to assist the global south in accessing green technologies so they can develop sustainably. And that's a demand, that's an anti-imperialist demand, and quite an important development, I think, on what the environmentalism of a lot of Western NGOs in Bolivia, especially, that just present the argument that any development is bad. That those in the UK and the US, it's fine for them to have a high standard of living and to have good hospitals, but people here should probably just stay living in huts and stay living in the jungle because that's more environmentally friendly.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for scratching the surface for us, Ollie. I think the information you have on Bolivia, but specifically what you're seeing there in the Chapare region of Cochabamba, which spans far beyond what we've been able to discuss, is super important. You can follow Ollie Vargas on Twitter at ovargas52. I'm at Camila Press, where I hope to link some more independent work. And of course, you can follow me as well at Camila Telestor. Ollie's in Bolivia reporting independently, so if you want to contribute to his efforts there, I'll link his PayPal in the description. The work is extremely valuable, and as someone who presides over some of what's put out editorially in my position at work, I've used Ollie as a primary source for Bolivia.